Well, hey folks, welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to be learning on inner primaries. We're going to be replacing this inner O-ring that sits on the back up against the engine case and this little seal here that sits, between the clutch basket and the transmission side. This just keeps oil inside your primary. If you ever have a reason to pull your inner primary out, like in this case, rebuilding a transmission. So come join me today as we get this gasket kit installed and have a whole lot of fun in the process. Welcome back to Butler Customs Motorcycle Shop. Now, this is a how-to video series that I've started, and it is actually part of a really bigger video series on a 1994 touring bike, Big Twin Evo motor 5-speed. Now, it's pretty much the same if you got a FRX or if you got a Softail, or it's pretty much the same thing. So hopefully this video will be beneficial for you. Oh, and you might have noticed, I got a ceiling now. Yeah. I tell you, getting big time here in the shop. Let's go ahead and get this oil draining out. The old Evos have the drain plug here in the front. I believe that is a 30T. So we'll get this draining out while we're working on the foot pegs and disconnecting the battery. I'm just going to pull this inspection plate off just so it'll drain out a little quicker. Let's go ahead and get these foot pegs off now. All right, we got our foot pegs off. Most of the oil is out. Now this is going to be messy. There's just no good way to get all the oil out. There's no certain procedure, but I like to break them loose by hand, crisscrossing them. And there will be oil coming out of the bottom. So just have your rag clean up best you can. I think they make long, narrow drip pans, but my center stand always gets in the way. Now there will be bolts of different sizes, so pay attention to that. But when we go back putting it together, I'll show you the differences and why they are different in lengths. This is ready to come off, and oh, it didn't make too bad of a mess. Not bad at all. Wow, this thing's been on here for a long time. We'll probably have to get a scraper in here and get all that off. And I want to break this compensator loose. And the reason for that is while everything is tight and on here, this is the one that's under a whole lot of torque. So we want to break this loose, just break it loose first. Then we can work on the clutch side. All right, this is a 1.5 inch nut size. Yeah, not a problem at all. Now we'll keep this on here because we want to break this nut loose next. Okay, now we're at the front of the bike. Here's the clutch cable. Now all we want to do is just release tension on the cable. I like to run them all the way in. So when you do that, then this clutch cable has a lot of slop in it. Now that slop you want because that releases tension on this rod, on this push rod that goes through your transmission. Okay, so now a lot of people will attack this nut, spin it off, put the Allen wrench in here and get this off. But you don't have to do that because the clutch is set and there's no sense in resetting it. So get you a good set of clip pliers, C-clip, needle nose, whatever, these things. So all we have to do is take this clip out right here and just hold it where it don't pop out. Now when you do that, when you take this out, watch this. This whole thing comes out. So now you don't have to worry about resetting this to where you need it. You can just leave it there. Here's the nut in here. And now this is reverse thread, so we will actually tighten it to get it undone. This nut is a 1¼ inch nut. Now remember, it's reverse thread, so you want to act like you're tightening it, and that will actually take it off. There you go. Now you might find that this clutch basket, if it's been on there a while, might be a little stuck. If that's the case, I'll show you what we can do, but usually just a little wiggling and that takes care of that. Let me get this off here. So this is a long shafted nut. You have your compensator cover, you have this, and then this whole piece comes off with the chain. So we want to leave that there. 9/16 on that. All right. Now, these old Evos, you can take this whole thing off, but you don't need to. So when this slides out, this nut will, or this bolt will stay in here. So now everything's ready to come off. I'm going to wiggle this a little bit back and forth. Just kind of walk it out a little bit. Now it's not coming off. Now I'm going to show you what you do, but you got to be careful. Now they make a clutch basket puller that threads on to this shaft and then onto this, and you screw it in and it pops this off. But they're not on there that tight. Yes, sometimes they're too tight to just, pull off, but I do have a little bit of play. So that's good. So what I can do very carefully is I can take a crowbar and I can go behind here on the basket and I can wedge up against these right here. Now be careful of the outside, don't mar that up. But with this gasket still on there, that's going to give us a little bit of play. So what I can do is just go back here and just give it a little, nothing major, just a little tug. You can get back here as well. Notice I'm just working it out. I do see it coming out. So I'm just being very, very careful, taking my time back and forth. And there, it's walked out. Now don't go gorilla on that, or you'll break this inner primary, or you'll mar up around here, and that's not good. Now this whole thing slides out just like that. This cover is made around this, and the cover comes off with all this on. So I usually just leave this on because it's kind of hard to get these teeth back fitted just right. I've spent 5 minutes before just wiggling trying to get this back on this shaft. Now the starter is connected to the back side of this, so you have to take the starter bolts out to slide this off. It won't come out. So if you take all these bolts out, you take this out, you take your shifter lever off, which you don't have to, but it just kind of helps if it's in the way. The shifter lever will come off with this inner primary. But if you forget those starter bolts and then you go to, crowbarring it, you'll break the inner primary. Make sure you take those bolts off. Now, anytime you're working around the starter, that starter is hardwired right to the battery. So please disconnect the negative or positive on your battery, or both, before you start ramming a big long extension up in there to get the starter bolts out. Let's get this jack shaft off. I think I'm going to just leave this connected. You will have a bolt here on the outside, a bolt here on the outside. The other bolts are on the inside. So this doesn't have to come out. We'll just leave it connected. That way his settings, as far as feet and lever wise, are set where he wants them. This is a 5/16 long bolt. Now, see how this whole starter is turning? Sometimes if you still had the clutch basket on, you could pull this out to lock it into the basket and then turn this. But it's not in there with a lot of torque because it's so small of a bolt. So what you can do is get a gun on here and just hit it a couple times and it comes out. Now when this bolt comes out, and this little washer spacer locking mechanism. I keep it all together because this shaft comes out as well, the gear comes out, and then I can pull this out as well. All this, which is several pieces, come out together. So keep this together and you won't have to have a headache of trying to fit it all back in there where it's supposed to go. So now all that's left, let's disconnect the battery by taking the seat off, getting the battery out, or just disconnecting it. Then go on the other side and work on our starter bolts. All we have to do is take the bolts out of this inner primary. We don't have to remove the starter. There's two bolts that hold the starter on. There's one on this side right here. And then there's one, where are you at? Way up there in the back. Can you see it? Yeah, right back there. It also has a ground wire on it as well. So those two bolts, that's all you have to do. You just have to back the bolts completely out. Don't worry about any wiring or all that. Those bolts just have to come out to get that inner primary off. What I've found useful, it's 1/4 inch, or should be a 1/4 inch Allen wobble extension, and then a couple of long extensions. That usually gets me in there. I don't have much trouble with it. Now sometimes there is the neutral cinch down here on top of the transmission housing, but very rarely do they get in the way. But you might have to just undo the wiring on that. Now do take these all the way out. This I can take that wobble extension off and just go straight in the hole there, and that was loose as a goose. The good thing I like about these Allen heads, there's not many things I like about them. Now on these old Evos, has two ground wires. One that does run up to the battery, and then one that does run to the frame right here. So when you hook this back up, make sure you have both ground wires in that one bolt hole. Now we don't have to move this starter out, just leave it there. We're disconnected from back here. Now we'll go on the other side, take all those inner bolts and two outer bolts out, and the whole inner primary comes off. All these on the inner will have these little lock-in tabs. You don't have to take it all the way out flat, but just take it back where your socket will get down over that. Now these tabs, I've got one tab that goes down over that keeps it from spinning off of the inner primary, and then I got one tab that comes down and holds it. Now when you go to tighten these back down, if you reuse these, they could break where they've been open and shut. So they give you another one to crimp if you need it. 1/2 inch. Now there is a sequence to tightening these and torquing them, but when I loosen these, I will just kind of hop around. All right, now that they're all loose, we can just put a gun on it. The outer ones will have a washer as well. The two inner ones that are on your case, they are going to be shorter, a lot shorter than the ones that are around your transmission. Now this will not fall on you. It's on this shaft, and usually it's sealed up pretty good. So again, just a little wiggle to get it off that race. This comes off completely. And there's the seal we'll have to replace. You also have a rubber seal around your case that you'll replace. You do not, in any circumstance, reuse this seal. It will leak 100% of the time on you. Your starter is still up here. It's still got it should have a collar on it, so you can leave that on. Now while you're doing all of this work, stop and ask yourself, is there anything else in here that needs to be done? Meaning, is this belt cracked? Is it old? Is it missing some teeth? Now would be the time to do this. Yes, you got to take your swing arm out on these models, the back tire, all that. Yes, it's a pain. But to change this belt or this sprocket, You have to go this far into the bike. So if you're here already, you've done half the work. Go ahead and replace this belt. His belt looks good. It's good and tight. There's no cracks in it. I mean, it does have some wear, but that's normal. This is your main seal here, or your clutch seal. We'll pull that. There we go. Looks like a 5/8 fits down in there pretty well. There we go. And there's what that seal looks like. And here is our new seal. Everything lines up well with that. And then we will oil this. We'll clean out our hole. And then this will be set in from the, like that, from the inside up. And remember, wherever you're trying to keep oil in, you will use this side. If you're trying to keep oil out, you will use this side. So we're trying to keep oil in the primary. This is the inner primary. So the seal will go like this, but be pushed in from the back side up. And then our shaft goes in here. Now your kit might come with two seals. One's a little bigger diameter than the other, the inner diameter. The outsides are the same. So a good way to test if you've got the right seal. Okay, so this is down inside. Your lip that the seal sets on is right there. That little lip right there, this seal will set on. And it sets not like that, but like this. So what you'll want to find, if you're going to hammer it in, is a socket that's going to set over that little lip. Okay? You don't want a socket setting on this. You want something that goes in between this lip of the gap. Set that on there, just like that, and that's what you want. So we'll oil that up and we'll drive that in. And you'll just feel with your fingers, make sure it's nice and flat down in there. And this was a 11/16 that I used to drive that in. So 3 things you want to be aware of when you're putting that inner primary back on. You have the new seal that'll go on here. This is the old seal. You have your starter shaft seal that goes around here. You have your main seal that goes over this race, and then your bearing sets on this race. You got to pay attention to all 3 seals when you're sliding this inner primary on. The reason for that is you could booger this seal up, booger this one up, booger this one up, and what will happen is it'll leak. It'll leak from one of those 3 places. So pay attention, please, when you're putting it on. Be careful. If something doesn't feel right, don't force it. Because you got to understand, you're setting seals on all 3 of these. And just take your time. Just be patient with it and take your time. So when you're putting the crank seal on, or the, I don't know what it's called, the big seal across the crankcase, you'll want to clean the surface well, because sometimes people use like a silicone seal to go on that, and this person that was in here last did. So you want to get all that off. If not, your new O-ring will not make a good seal. So what I like to do is go flat across the surface here, and then I'll go flat across this lip. There shouldn't be much trash, but if they did use that silicone, you'll have to get all of that off. Now, some kits you buy, you'll have a fatter O-ring and a thinner O-ring, and they will be different in diameters. So you always want to match what come off, which was the thinner one, and it is the bigger diameter one, so it will go on, fit on there well. Never put O-rings on dry, so I'll put a little oil in my fingers and just work it around. Now usually these will set on and stay on, But if not, you might have to use a little bit just to tack it on, just to get it to set in that lip. But this one is setting well, and that is installed. Now our other seals are already on the inner primary, so we'll oil them up. The back side of the inner primary surface is cleaned, and I went ahead and cleaned the outside since it was off. Your kit will also come with some new lock tab washers for that inner primary. There should be 6 of them to lock in. Now before you set this inner primary on, there's some things you have to do. Oil up your O-ring around your crankcase. Make sure it's seated in that lip good all the way around. Get your peepers underneath there. Make sure it's seated. I oil up my starter shaft. I oil up my race. I oiled up my race main shaft seal. I oiled up my starter seal. Now before you set this up on there, the bolts, go ahead and clean your bolts up. Put your new lock washers on, and you want one tab down and the other 2 tabs up toward the head. On these you'll find there's 2 long ones, there's 1 medium long one, and then there are 2 short ones that go on the inside. Then on the outside here and here, you've got 2 bolts with flat head washers. Now clean the threads up and don't put Loctite on them. Instead, what the manual says is to put RTV, gasket maker, on them. So just apply some on the thread, make sure it goes all the way around. I usually put it about halfway up. Okay, about like that. I'm going to go ahead and do all the bolts like that. Even these on the outside. I don't think it's required, but I'll just go ahead and put it on there. And then these bolts are torqued to 20 foot-pounds. And there is a sequence to torquing them that I'll show you once we get the inner primary on. Now also on the inner primary, on the back, where your bolt holes are, I will put a little bit of gasket maker around all my bolt holes. We don't want this primary leaking out your threads. So just like that, just apply a little bit just around those. Now everything's oiled up, everything's greased up. It's time to go. Now the manual says do take some electrical tape and tape around your threads here and here so you don't damage the seal. But I start here by getting my eyeballs down here and going in this way, so I don't ever really have to cover those up because I can just sit here and eyeball it and watch it. Now this main shaft seal is what you want to pay very close attention to. There you go. And then the bearing goes up over the race. Very good. Now it'll kind of set on there. Now your shortest bolts with the lock tabs on them will go closest to your crankcase. So we're just going to kind of finger thread those in for now. With that RTV on there, they get really tight really quick. Your 2 outer ones, we'll just screw on there just to get them started. Now your 2 longest ones will go down here at the bottom and over here on this side. And then your mid long one will go right there in the front of your main shaft. Now there is a torquing sequence to these. So they're all 20 foot-pounds, but you'll tighten your 4 engine mount bolts first to 20 foot-pounds. You'll make sure your lock washers are lined up good. And I think it's, I don't know, 18 to 21 foot-pounds, so I'll just go with 20. Now there'll be a gap back here until you push this up and seat this up well. So you want to make sure that this seal closes up really well where it's supposed to be closed. And make sure your tabs are locked in there where you can lock one down. I like to start with this bottom one first. I'll watch my case up top. Then I'll go across on the outside. Then I'll come inside here as well. And then down here. Then I'll recheck all my torques. They might loosen up on you as it sets in there. All right. And then your other three back here to your transmission. Then once everything's torqued down, don't forget to go back here with some pliers and lock those new tabs down so that your bolts don't back out. If you've got access to two, leave one open. That way the next feller can use the other one to bend back. All right, now our inner primary is on, and we can go ahead, since we got it oiled up, wiggle that in. There we go. Now we'll put our spring on. We'll put plunger up. And then when you're putting the jack shaft together, you might want to consider replacing this little washer because it's got a little O-ring there as well, and a little lock tab there that locks down into there. I will put some blue Loctite on that bolt and get that tightened down. Then our inner primary is on and ready for the clutch and the compensating sprocket. All right, so the reason I was having such a time with this starter jack shaft, I kept trying to tighten, and one tighten down. I'm like, what's going on? Well, I forgot to, once I put the inner primary on, to hook the starter bolts back in and bring the starter up to that seal. Then this fit fine and everything looks like it's spinning fine. I'm going to hook the battery up and hit the start button just to make sure this is ejecting out nice and smooth, and especially going back in. You keep an eye on it. Tell me what she does, because I've got to, it's a push button starter. All right, so it sounds like it plunged out and plunged back in. So I think that everything's good. We're going to set both up as a whole assembly. We're going to be careful of these splines and especially this threaded part. But again, I'm down here eye level where I can see. Now it's kind of a balancing act because you've got to get your adjustment up over this washer or over this bolt, then set everything in. So it's kind of a juggling act, but I'll go ahead and try to get this bolt in. Slide that on, get the bolt in. Now I can work on, oh, well, goodness. Let me go ahead and set this basket on, just kind of set it on. Then maybe we can bring this up just enough. Bring that bolt in. Oh yeah. There we go. Oh yeah. And put this on so we don't lose our chain. Make sure that's seated well. We'll just put this up here just to keep everything together. We'll be pulling this bolt back off, but let's just put it on here for now. And then it's a tight fit, but it's wiggling. There we go. And our nut will run the rest of that down for us. My apologies, I've torqued this nut down and this nut down, red thread lock, tightened the primary chain, and forgot to hit record. So I can't take it all back apart just for you, but I do have a video of a similar model that we did a clutch pack, or actually a new basket for. And so check that out. Now, since we did not have to take the clutch apart, we left the setting where it was before. So we can put this back in and take our O-ring or snap ring and snap it in and make sure it is seated in the groove, and you can tell by the way it spreads itself out that it is. So now all of this is done and we're ready to put on our new gasket and our primary cover. Well, there you go, folks. I hope that you had a good time with me in the shop. I hope that we learned together, and I love working on old bikes. You know, when I started YouTube videoing, I just did it for the company, and it's turned into so much more, and it's because of you. So thank you so much to everybody that has subscribed, commented, shared, liked, thumbs up, thumbs down. I thank you all for just interacting with me in our lives and our giveaways and all the things that we do. I just like hanging out in the shop with you. So thank you so much. I'll see you again next week. And hey, tell your mama now I said Merry Christmas.